Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the L1 show. Today is March 12th, and we're doing government and, was it security? Security. Usually security on a Monday or Tuesday. It's Tuesday for you.
Although, probably should have switched it around this week because we got Big Monday, or Big Tuesday, Little Wednesday, Big Friday. Little in the middle, but she's got much back, so stick around for the entire week.
There were a lot. I was like, oh, the news is going to go really quick this week. And then I got to the last half of links and it was just dragging. I was just like, good Lord.
It's a lot of stuff back there.
We'll try not to drag it too much. Let's get to it and talk about something that the AMD board should have seen coming. I mean, come on. Look at what's happening to NVIDIA.
No!
AMD reportedly hits U.S. regulatory roadblock for China-tailored chip. This is the MI309. Like... Formula 309. That's not even correct.
Before we started recording, we literally were like, wow, we've had such a good run on audio and like all our setup, nothing's broken for a while. And then
this OBS doesn't,
update,
the new browsers don't work correctly.
The global situation is really dicey, and AMD made the MI309 just for China, and it's cut down like the A800 from NVIDIA. And the State Department is not having it at all. And we got A800s in the house. I'm testing them right now.
But I think the State Department is basically saying, hey, read between the lines here, guys. We actually don't want you to sell anything to China. We don't want to come out and say that, but we're probably going to enforce it that way.
Listen, though, we really, really need line to go up. Don't you understand? Line has to go up during these unprecedented times.
Well, companies' lines are going up, and big tech companies, very often, those lines are standing on the shoulders of some free software. They like to use it, they don't like to make it, and when they do use it, they don't like to follow the rules.
Exclusive, Axios says, the feds to offer new support to open source developers. Somebody was paying attention inside the federal government when the Log4j or Log4 security incident happened a while back. We covered that. Basically, this open source software had a vulnerability, and it was pretty bad. You could take over a lot of servers that use this software remotely. Well, that's not great. It's especially not great if you have threat actors that are paid for by foreign governments that insert people into organizations like Amazon and Google to do software development. And they do their job normally, but they can also deliver subtle defects. That's a huge worry. That's not really anything to do with what they're talking about here, but that is kind of the doomsday scenario. So they did tabletop scenarios, meaning like simulations where they look at...
D&D campaigns.
It basically is a D&D campaign. It is a D&D campaign in a lot of ways for, okay, something was found, like how do we respond to that? Do we get the supply chain? How do we get the patch out? How do we contact customers? How do we close this up before somebody shuts us down?
So they're going to throw money at it. And they had some open source people come, so maybe those people will actually know how to get it to the right places.
There's a lot of upsides to this. There can be some scary, dark downsides. Linus Torvalds famously, when the CIA, or somebody asked him, was like, has anybody ever approached you about putting a backdoor in the Linux kernel? And he said, no.
And one of the things about it is it's an election year, so you want to hand out as much money as you can, and you want to stir up as much controversy as you can. You want to take this old dead horse back out of the shed, which isn't really that dead, because there's some merit here.
Bipartisan US bill could force ByteDance to divest TikTok. Yeah, it's just more more and more of the same.
How do we know pretty much with certainty that TikTok is a spy apparatus for Beijing? Because all the other social media apps are a spy apparatus for Washington.
And also Google and Meta. Like, it's really a spy apparatus for Meta. And then once it's a spy apparatus for Meta, you can just buy the records from Meta or force your way in and observe the records inside of Meta.
Or Meta bribes you with those records.
Yeah, I mean, it's just... You don't.
All right, please pass some good legislation for us and you can have all our data.
You have to not build it, or we have to get sophisticated enough that we've got an API interface. Like, come on.
And if you're one of these companies, you can do pretty much what you want. Nobody will really call you out on it unless you target the wrong person. Any U.S. lawmaker will trigger this response.
U.S. sanctions for the founder of spyware maker Intellexa for targeting Americans. Great. How long before we see sanctions for all of the Pegasus people? And I mean all of them.
Weird, huh? This is two people, the guy that runs the place and a woman that works with him. And so they will personally, if any kind of money gets to them, you cannot do a deal under U.S. sanctions. So it should stop a lot. Well, that's the idea, at least.
If it were effective, it would stop a lot. But, who's to say that there's not people that are working for foreign governments inside of Apple introducing vulnerabilities, just very, very subtle vulnerabilities. We're basically not set up to monitor and track that because we're stupid.
And more alms for the plebs as we go into the election. These things that people have been complaining about for decades. Finally, we're going to throw some word service to them.
A new proposal could ban landlords from charging for cable and internet in bulk. The good side of the legislation is it's targeting landlords in places like New York City. Let's say that you get a 16-story apartment building in New York City. A lot of the time, a cable company like Charter will approach you and give you money to make sure that your tenants don't have a choice. That's good legislation for those people, but maybe not amazing legislation in other scenarios.
It's something. I'm glad I'm not among the apartment dwelling swine anymore.
The reports that analyze the situation in New York City, it is astonishing the level of corruption and dysfunction.
I think that's true of any place, any like rental market. It's just bad now.
Honestly, I think small town corruption often eclipses large town corruption. It just doesn't get reported.
It's a lot more. It's easier to see the loose threads and the feral rats in that level of density. Is what you're saying? Maybe.
And more people get ground under the boots, and you can notice it more. Whereas you can almost completely silence them in a small town environment. And this gal, she's a big city girl, and she's tired of being the target of a very terrible kind of media. She claims that she's going to stop it in its tracks.
AOC's plan to end unwilling deepfakes, unconsenting. I mean, the headline says something in some context, but the law actually doesn't give that context at all. The context, okay, well, the law says that it's worse for that, but actually it says non-consensual, like any kind of non-consensual editing even.
And the same punishment applies to the recipient of these things. So if I unknowingly receive a deep fake,
if you could reasonably have it's like, you should know, she would never say that.
Could I prove in a court of law that I didn't know who Taylor Swift was? I mean, I do, but I'm sure there's somebody in America who doesn't.
My husband claims he doesn't know a single Taylor Swift song, and I'm like, you do?
That's a lie.
Yeah, you just don't know that it's a Taylor Swift song.
That's not even he doesn't realize it. He's just lying.
Yeah, there's so many, and you hear them everywhere, like every store, restaurant.
I'm musically illiterate. Like, I literally cannot read the equivalent of music, and it's like, oh yeah, Taylor Swift. Yeah.
Name a Taylor Swift song. Do you know one? That's the test.
Just name a song?
Yeah. Like, can you think of one? Maybe Wendell's that one guy in America.
Is there one titled Taylor Swift?
That would be
she did a self-titled album, but she didn't do a song.
She should do a song titled Taylor Swift is number one.
And that's the only lyric. It's just her chanting that.
But Oregon is number one, perhaps, in the right to repair race because they have taken theirs one step further. And this is clearly just aimed right at Apple. This should be the Apple law from Oregon because they are targeting one horrible behavior.
Oregon OK's right to repair bill that bans the blocking of aftermarket parts. Heck yeah.
There's carve-outs, though. This will affect everything except phones. It won't affect phones until 2025.
That's not soon enough.
That is next year, though. Like that feels like a long time away, but we're in 2024 now, which is like.
But all other devices are sold after 2015. Why make the exception?
Why make the exception? Yeah.
And they also do not set a sunset date. Like, you know how the European ones are like, you have to support these parts and you have to do it for 7 years after you sell the phones. There's none of those concessions here. So if Apple was like, we don't like that you're replacing those screens, we're sunsetting that device, then they're not affected by it.
And they absolutely will do that.
Yeah.
See, also like the accelerometer, like, which is not even an Apple specific part, and they don't want to work and play nice with. Oh, you need to calibrate the accelerometer. Oh, it'd be a shame if we didn't let you do that.
And there's probably some bitter tears and frustration in the Cruise conference room because everything that they have lost, Waymo has gained.
California approves Waymo robotaxi services in the LA and San Francisco neighboring cities.
Right now, it's just going to be the employees. They're going to beta test it. If you're an employee for Waymo, you get free taxi rides while they're testing out this service.
Media seems to have two modes when reporting all this. The first mode is pedestrian. Excuse me. Pedestrians, get run over and that sort of thing. And then someone says, well, do you want Tesla to have self-driving taxis first? And then all of a sudden it's like, this isn't so bad. Waymo's okay.
Which overlord do you want to serve? And this man's going to be serving some years in prison because of his Discord leaking.
Discord leaker Jack Teixeira
Teixeira
pleads guilty and he's seeking a light 11-year sentence. Reading this, there's one really alarming line in here, which is, by agreeing to a plea deal, he avoids a charge of espionage. And then there's a quote from the prosecutor saying, we couldn't find any evidence of espionage. And it's like, wait a minute. What? And that is a very, very sad commentary on the way this works in America. Like, it's not, this guy's guilty of being an idiot and definitely damaging national security. But
yeah, well, I mean, he definitely did. He knew that he shouldn't be doing what he was doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this was done. And it wasn't, I guess you could maybe give it some of the Assange treatment, but I don't think he was doing it for the same reasons.
no.
He was just, having fun on Discord, maybe.
And literally the prosecutor saying, well, we didn't find any evidence of espionage, but the threat and coercion of espionage was enough to get him to sign a plea deal. Like, how is that not grounds for a mistrial before you even get started?
So if espionage is 60 years, what should just trying to impress your friends on Discord be?
I think 5 years is probably
Life.
fine.
Seems a little low. 11 is the minimum for what he's taking.
Yeah.
And if you're not hip to it, we've actually been running out of helium in America and the world. And helium is not just party balloons. There's a lot of medical equipment and, of course, hard drives and other things. We need the helium. Thank God we found more that we can exploit.
Minnesota. Helium discovery in northern Minnesota may be the biggest ever in North America. Let's please not waste it and vent it into the atmosphere. We're going to need helium for many hundreds of years.
They've dug a hole, and
As you do.
they a good helium deposit, I believe they said, was around 3 to 4% saturation. This guy's deposit is 12%.
Wow.
You think like when they were celebrating, they were all doing helium balloons?
Yeah. Woohoo!
And we're back to standardized testing.
Ugh.
We experimented briefly with maybe not doing that, and the entire education system seemed to just nosedive, although that could have been for a lot of other reasons.
Yeah, there's
But
lots of
anyway,
things playing into that.
we're going back to it, but there's a big change.
In a first, U.S. students will take the SAT entirely online. No pencils required.
You will still have to go to
A
a
testing site.
location, and you will be monitored. So also,
Invasively.
from 3 to 2 hours, less reading
Yeah.
on this version of it.
Well, no one can read anymore, so that makes sense.
Just show you everything in TikTok format videos. And the big controversy, I suppose, this week is the EU DMA has come into effect. We're feeling it, and companies are still doing everything they can to dance around it.
EU looking to Apple's decision to kill Epic Games developer account. So that was the big news. Apple reinstated Epic Games developer account so they could work on the EU version of the App Store for iPhones that are only in the EU. This is not coming to America. And then they turned it off.
It's back up now, but that was the
Is
big
it?
story. Yeah. I saw another story that said it had updated and said that they were
I didn't
back.
see that. So the last update we have here is the MP saying that this is absolutely in violation.
Right.
They thought they were going to just ease in there, and it's like, oh well, they said they were violating the account or canceling the account because of a long record of them messing around with the Apple account, and that was in the terms of service. But I guess because the MP stepped in now, they've...
No, I think I saw an update. It was like this morning that they had reinstated.
They also have I would love to know if EA is fudging the context a little bit, because I haven't found other sources of it. But there was some emails from Apple where one of the reasons cited is because Epic is complaining about Apple even after their account was reinstated, and that was also against the terms of service. You're not allowed to disparage
I think
Apple.
they mentioned that in the story. Right? It's basically just, you're not allowed to say bad things about us on our service.
Which is, I mean, I get it, but also how childish.
How childish. And also, that shouldn't, I mean, in the position that Apple is in, that is definitely abusing their position in...
The gatekeeper?
Yeah.
That's what they call them. If you're a gatekeeper, then you can't play those games. And how many days has this been in effect?
Yeah.
And they have already started their games. And they are making other concessions in, again, just the most basic and minimal way.
Apple is working to make it easier to switch from iPhone to Android because of the European Union. That's the headline, but you dig into it, and it's just providing a minimal framework for you to export your data out of Apple because they have you trapped.
And for the first time ever, you can uninstall Safari.
Whoa.
If you peel back the linoleum here a little bit, you really start to think like, okay, if Apple has like the most amazing Apple apologist, which exists in our community, that is able to rationalize Apple's behavior here, if they truly have the superior product, why would you go through all the trouble to lock somebody in and prevent them from leaving and to make it hard to use a competing app store? Like, sure, let somebody try to do something and see how awful the experience is. It's a self-solving problem.
And not only is Apple doing the absolute minimum and using every kind of loophole that they can find, but they've been sitting around dreaming up ways that people might exploit this. Because think about this. What if you were to go to Europe, purchase a phone that is not under all the restrictions the rest of the world is because of this, but then take that phone to another country and use it with all your privacy? Well, they've thought about that.
Apple will cut off third-party app store updates if your iPhone leaves the EU for a month. Again, why are we worried about this when the Pegasus and 5 other spyware makers that we talked about last time have free reign over your iPhone? It's because locking people in, it's like, as long as the sheep don't realize they're sheep, doesn't matter. We must prevent them from realizing that they're sheep.
And we must treat them like sheep by telling them things like this. If you have any sort of analytical reasoning powers at all, your first question is, who said this? The answer is, they're not telling.
Number of agencies have concerns about sideloading on iPhone, according to Apple.
Just agencies. It's
Yeah.
probably like their marketing agency.
Yeah, this is like, I don't know, what's a paper company? General Mills? No, they don't make paper.
Dunder Mifflin.
Dunder Mifflin makes paper. They're really concerned about the things people might use paper for. IBM is really concerned about the programs people might run on an IBM computer. It makes no sense.
I think they did say it was a government agency. They might have gone that far, but we're paywall here. But I'm pretty sure they did say that.
Would you rank that, if you're that agency, it's like, is your concern about sideloading above or below the fact that you have state-sponsored malware that lives completely fine in iPhones for years at a time?
And this bad behavior is endemic among big tech companies, which is hilarious because the hypocrisy of it all is they're constantly pointing at one another and saying, look, that's a monopolist, when they themselves are absolutely monopolists. And Google has absolutely pointed to Apple and said, look what they're doing with the walled garden. They're fleecing people. It's not okay. But then
Google adds new developer fees as part of the Play Store's DMA compliance plan. Do you want to sell apps in the European Union? You're going to have to pay more, sorry. It's like, wait, but won't this hasten the exodus from the application?
just like Apple, and they're using the same structure, which is after 1 million installs or purchases or whatever, you start paying 50 cents per back to them.
I think this is probably okay if we have an actual competing third-party app store, because Google will change their tune really quickly.
And once in a while, you got to give it up to the European Union. They do something that is very common sense. And it has to be common sense because the industry has gone insane.
Carmakers must bring back buttons, say Europe.
I was glad you added this because I had a separate source for this because I was like, we got to talk about this one.
Unfortunately, it's not all buttons. It is only these.
Indicators, hazard lights, windscreen wipers, the horn, and SOS features.
Should
Basically, things that are just like basic functionality on a car should not be on a screen.
But I bet more people wreck trying to change the radio.
That's
or the
true. Or like their
music
air conditioning or
I think that Tesla's going to go to like a large language model. And it's like, not only are there no touchscreen buttons, there's no buttons of any kind. You just talk to your car, and it's like, hey, car, will you turn on the windshield wipers? I'm sorry,
And then it's like,
baby.
I'm sorry, I can't do that because your accent's too thick.
But you also have some people who can't speak.
Yeah.
So you can't. I mean, that would be a huge
Yeah.
violation.
It doesn't matter. Musk will do it anyway.
Is there ADA compliance for cars?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, there's definitely things that you have to add to your car. Like if you got
Right.
one arm, you got to have the little knob
Yeah.
for the steering wheel. So I don't know if it works in both directions. I mean, there is definitely an argument that's like, well, when you get to a certain level of disability, maybe the car's not for you.
Yeah.
but not being able to speak shouldn't be one of them.
Yeah, that doesn't affect anything.
Get the Neuralink implant, and it's like, oh, this is a Neuralink equipped car.
It's like they get pulled over for texting while driving. It's no, I'm text to speeching so that I can turn on the air conditioning.
Get in the car.
Oh, that's
and it's
better.
like, groceries.
And I'm going to say it right here. I know, not a trustworthy source, but they were taking a little victory lap. I thought it'd be fun to throw this in.
The European Commission confirms Apple's anti-competitive behavior is illegal and harms consumers. Again, if Apple's competing on the merits, let people use their products however they want. It's like Apple's like, we're going to show you the way. This is how you can have a great experience. And then, if you want to, shove a banana into the USB-C port, it's cool. We don't care. Whatever.
That was the Spotify website. If you weren't sure why we said that, they've got their own little blog and they're dunking on.
That's a
Apple.
press release, yeah.
And France has done something very impressive, and this is way more understanding than you would expect. I wouldn't expect any of our lawmakers to understand this process. So good on you, France.
French court issues damages award for violation of the GPL. So this is a company that offered their code as open source or a commercial license. And somebody used the open source version of their software in a way that was not compliant with the open source license, the GPL in this case. And so the company sued for damages. And so the company that used the source code without authorization said, well, it's open source. We can do this. We didn't enter into like a binding contract. The court would have none of it, which is great.
But they did change it. And the rules say that when you change it, you must open your changes up and submit them back so that maybe it can be incorporated into it, right? Everybody gets better.
The recipient of the software can request the source, and they never complied.
That was Orange, a telecom company in France.
They could have avoided that by paying the commercial license. They didn't do that either.
And perhaps, he's not the richest man in the world, but he's one of the most powerful right now.
He's probably moving up in that list right now.
Sam Altman, and his future looks pretty bright. But perhaps his most ambitious plan keeps hitting roadblocks.
Spain tells Sam Altman and Worldcoin to shut down its eyeball scanning orbs. Yeah.
They claim that he's maybe capturing a little too much information to conform to those EU privacy rules.
Gee, you think?
This seems like it would be the plot of one of the Bond movies where, the bad guy's collecting all this biographical info so he knows who the spies are. And it's like, no, we're building a global network. And it's like, how did you build the global network of fully autonomous kill planes? And it's like, oh, I made sure everyone that was working for me wasn't a spy.
Well, Spotify, they might seem like they're fighting the good fight, but they are still doing the same things that all the other companies are doing when they're pressed by this EU monster who is holding them, accountable for all their tactics.
Spotify to increase subscription price in France to counter new music streaming tax.
So in France, they are giving you a music streaming tax. It's really, I don't agree with it because it's not like, oh, all artists need to be paid more from Spotify. The argument is French artists need to be subsidized because French people don't listen to French artists when given an international selection of music. but it's going to happen. Spotify is going to pass it along to the customer as expected.
Neat.
And the age of data, big data has all of our information. Can they protect it? Well, no. We've seen pretty...
Absolutely not. Not even a little.
Yeah, there's no argument there, but can they even manage it?
Cops visit school of wrong person's child, mix up victims and suspects, and epic data fail. These people had the same names and the same birthday, and the police kept getting it wrong for years. One of the things they blamed was their case record management system, which doesn't make a distinction between the victim of a crime and a suspect in a crime.
To make it more complicated, both of these kids had been victims of crimes. Only one of them was a suspect in a crime.
Yeah.
They kept going to the victim only about the crimes of the victim and suspect.
It seems like that would be such an easy thing to just add a note, even.
That would require reading.
You're going to need to add another variable, right?
Yeah.
But if you see, you've watched the body cam videos, if you don't have an ID, they make you give your name and date of birth, which in this case,
Same
thing. And obviously, we've been on a long campaign here in America to get China out of our telecoms, out of our software chains, wherever we can. And China, in turn,
China wants to, quote unquote, delete America from its technology with the secret Document 79 order banning U.S. software at state-run companies by 2027. This is probably not unreasonable when we see how dangerously insecure American software is. See also the SolarWinds hack. But also, is there shenanigans going on? I don't know. If there is shenanigans going on, this is perfectly valid.
and maybe the Chinese people are actually hip to this and they like it because the trend seems to be going that way.
Apple iPhone sales slide as Huawei soars, according to this report. Yeah.
Could also be the deflationary hell that has descended on China, and no one can afford an iPhone.
Yeah, see,
which is
iPhones are kind of a luxury item now.
way more expensive than the Huawei.
I mean, they've always kind of been a luxury item, but especially right now.
They're made out of inferior, but they convince you that they're superior. Like, why?
Now, we learned a few weeks ago that anti-piracy ads not effective on men, but effective on women, which seems to follow a trend of women being lesser pirates. But now we're learning maybe that's all just been bad data.
In Indonesia, women pirate more music and movies than men.
This paper didn't offer a reason why, but I would assume it has to do something with cost.
You know what I assume it has to do with? This was self-reporting in phone and in-person interviews. And I think women are just more likely to talk to you about it.
Yeah, that's true.
Because
Women are socialized to be social.
I know that these things can never be accurate because if you call me or you walk up to me on the street to do a survey, I'm going to hang up on you and or walk away. So you're never,
or yell at you.
You're never really going to count me. So I don't think your numbers are valid. Some people are smart enough not to talk to you.
Also, it's weird too because like Nintendo would absolutely say that, you know, I've pirated my ROMs and blah blah blah, but I have all of the things. I have like 5 and 6 copies, or 5 and 6 instances of the physical ROM. It's like,
Yeah, but we need you to buy it again.
yeah, I have, but
No,
I have
again.
limits.
And over in India, they were kind of painting themselves as the AI mecca, right? Come here, develop your AI, everything's cool. We're not going to play those games that the other governments are playing. And then someone pointed out to Modi how they asked ChatGPT a question about him being a fascist. Guess what the answer was? He didn't like it.
India reverses AI stance, requires government approval for model launches. Okay.
One guy said, I moved here from the States and I put like so many million into this business to try to bring AI to the Indians. And now you're just going to yank it out from under me, really? Over in Taiwan, they are solving problems with technology, which is kind of dystopian and Orwellian, but it could also be convenient, but mostly dystopian and Orwellian.
New Taipei to launch smart roadside parking inquiry system. Basically, if you're driving around a car, you need a lot of room to park. Everybody's got mopeds. But this has sensors in parking spots, so you can ask an app, where is an empty parking spot? And the app will tell you.
The app will also automatically deduct the funds from your account, and it'll also automatically deduct the funds if you get a parking violation. But you can do it without the app, and somehow you print a paper receipt, and you can take that to any convenience store and pay it. What a cool policy that is.
That is nice.
It uses it's detecting the magnetics, same way our traffic lights work. So it knows when someone's there and when it's not. You can use the app to direct you to a parking spot.
I got a ticket last year, and then trying to figure out where to pay it in this hell of where they've like changed all the offices downtown. It took me forever.
They do make it very difficult. We probably don't have enough population to merit the convenience store.
Yeah.
And Canada has it's been hit after hit of destroying freedoms, which makes this astonishing. I guess the Canadian Supreme Court still has some validity.
Police now need a warrant to get a person's IP address, Supreme Court rules. Yeah, that's good. It's like people have a reasonable expectation of privacy with this. It's not a business record. Can we have some of those officials move to America that think that way?
Now, this guy was guilty of sin. He accessed something. I think he stole some stuff online, and it came back to his and his father's IP addresses. So it was for sure him. But he argued in court that they didn't have any way to know that, and it went all the way up the appeals chain. The Supreme Court says, yeah.
Something fruit of the poison tree.
I didn't even know they had that. And wow, more bad news for VMware. It has been a tough 2024 for VMware, and especially its customers.
VMware Sandbox escape bugs are so critical, patches are released for end-of-life products. Basically, if you get control of a machine that's a virtual machine, you can take over the whole host. Sort of bad news for cloud service providers.
You're going to want to patch that. And usually when we look at data breach, one of the big things to determine how bad it is what columns they got out of the database. This might be the worst one we've ever seen.
They got select star. Fidelity customers' financial info feared stolen in suspected ransomware attack. What did they get? Your name, your address, your social security number, your bank routing number, your bank account number, your PIN number, or that sort of stuff. If it was on file, your credit card number, your debit card number, if you had that on file.
So nothing really important is what you're saying.
It's really bad.
The routing number and the bank account number, there's so much. They could just set up an ACH transfer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to hide, but if you have a way to launder that money and get away with it.
Yeah. Well, or if you do it quick enough. And a lot of the time, banks are not, you call your bank and you say, you should block ACH transactions on this account. So few people ask for that. They often don't do that because they don't even think that that's a real threat. It's a real threat.
Yeah, for sure. And no honor among thieves, right? If you're a young person and you're good at technology and you're like, maybe I should join a ransomware gang because they seem to get a lot of money. Well,
there's better gangs to join.
There's a cautionary tale.
Black Cat Ransomware Group apparently implodes after $22 million payment by Change Healthcare. So if you were keeping score here in America, you had a hard time filling your prescription drugs at a lot of pharmacies in America. A lot of problems the last couple of weeks. Apparently to get that back online, Change Healthcare, they were willing to pay a $22 million ransom, which they did. And the ransomware group apparently wasn't expecting that, or they didn't pay out the commission correctly on the people that did that. It went bad fast.
So here's the usual law enforcement seize page, but there's something special about this one. Law enforcement didn't create it. It's fake. They're faking out the other ransomwares because they stole all the money and they wanted to make it seem like they got caught. They did not get caught. They are on the run with 22 mil.
Wow.
And this seems like a pretty common thing that we see. There was a horrible bug. Some big tech company knew about it, but they decided just not to tell anybody.
Hackers exploited a Windows 0 day for 6 months after Microsoft knew of it. Yeah, this has to do with, are you an administrator on the system or do you run stuff at the kernel? And so Microsoft is saying, listen, if you've already got administrator access, you can do whatever you want, basically. So they don't necessarily always patch vulnerabilities, but in this case, it was so trivial to compromise that they said, okay, I guess we'll fix it.
Now, you might be thinking, didn't we hear from our glorious leader that this kind of thing was not going to be tolerated anymore and you had to report immediately? Well, Microsoft argues that, again, this is not really a bug because if you're already an administrator, we can't help you, which I guess there's some truth to that.
Mm-hmm.
And the old tech war with China, as usual, has sleeper agents.
Former Google engineer indicted for stealing AI secrets to aid Chinese companies. Oh, it's that thing that I was talking about at the beginning of this episode.
You know
Dang-
what? You know
dang
what?
it.
What burned him is that when he moved to China and started advertising his company, one of the things he said was, "We have Google technology."
Can we make it a little more obvious?
No one will ever suspect that it was me.
And I thought this was going to be another feel-good Golden State Killer story, but unfortunately, they didn't find the killer's DNA, just the victim.
Decades-old missing person case solved after relative uploads DNA to genealogy site.
I wouldn't call it solved.
Yeah, no, it actually opens up even more questions. So they figured out that this body that they had found belonged to some family that had reported a missing person a bazillion years ago, and so like 2 and 2 are connected, but they don't have any leads on the killer, and it's been a bazillion years and a lot of problems.
I mean, I guess that's some level of closure, I guess, but you probably already suspected that they had
You
passed.
could inter the actual remains. I think they found the bones.
Yeah.
So, and it's that awful time of year again where you have to cough up your money, and just to make it a little bit worse, the people that you use, the services used for that, are trying to take advantage of you in every way that they can.
TurboTax, an Intuit company, wants you to give them permission to use your tax return to show you ads. You can say no, but they go out of their way to make it sound like you can't say no.
How predatory is that? Like, you just got a return. And it's like, here's all this cool, shiny stuff you can get. Like, almost like you're at a Chuck E. Cheese.
I think they actually ask you at the beginning of the process because it's just like, now, in order to do this, you're going to have to give us your permission to do this. But you don't. You totally don't have to do that.
He
Do you think the
mentions-
ads change based on your income?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And your home ownership, they know
Yeah.
that. They know whether or not you're married. They know a lot of things. He mentioned a specific phrase, and it was just something like, we just need to get some quick permissions from you. When you see that, the other stuff is not worded in a way that you would understand. But when you see that, he says you got to turn up the red flags and just start turning them down on all kinds of options.
Good grief.
Oh,
Is there
it
no safety from ads anymore?
We just need your okay on a couple of things.
You don't need it. You don't. You want it, but you don't need it.
We need you're okay on a couple of things. Store.level1text.com.
We need your okay on a couple of things because we're an industry that shouldn't really exist. It should just be simple.
This is a great way. It's a great data point on the erosion of public trust. This is why companies doing this is what drives everybody to socialism, probably.
Well, I do love it when we get comments from people in other countries who talk about how their tax process works, and it's very straightforward, and it's like, oh, I wish we had that.
When you boil it all down, the only possible reason that our tax process could be as complicated as it is to exclude certain people from having to pay taxes. I should have sorted this with the other story because this is, it's the pharmacy hack thing that we were talking about earlier, but this is just a good point because you can think about ransomware and it seems sort of like nebulous and it's like, well, does that really affect me? I don't know. Did you need insulin last week?
U.S. prescription drug market is in disarray after ransomware gang attacks. This article talks a little bit more about that. You can read that. So was it United Health? Because people were so worried about the ransomware spreading, other companies disconnected all their stuff as well, which sort of compounded the problem. Not only did they disconnect United Health from their networks, they unplugged a lot of stuff until they could assess, is like, are we in danger here? Is there anybody in here that's not supposed to be here? Which is probably a prudent move.
So you could still buy drugs, but you couldn't submit an insurance claim for your drugs. So one guy said, yeah, I had the option of getting the drugs that I need right now for $212 or waiting until they fix it and the insurance would pay for it. So, tough choice.
There were a couple of pharmacy chains that filled the drugs anyway, and there was one insurance carrier. I don't think it was United. There was one insurance carrier that we just unplugged everything. And if they accidentally filled something, they said, we'll work with pharmacies. Don't worry about it. It's fine, which is a reasonable response because they don't want even more regulator scrutiny because they make a lot of money.
And they need regulator scrutiny
Yeah.
so desperately.
Yeah, they really do.
Well, if you're serious about security, you're using two-factor authentication on anything that matters. And big tech companies, they probably force you to do that, as part of the OPSEC. But the old supply chain, it'll get you every time.
A leaky database spilled two-factor codes for the world's tech giants. So this is not just the two-factor codes, but the seeds that are used for two-factor. So if you have the seed, you could generate two-factor on your own. So even though the leak is over now, it's probably worth regenerating.
And we had some big outages in the week. This was one of them.
LastPass suffers worldwide outage causing a 404 error. This was not a CDN problem. This was they fat-fingered a software update.
And it was just the website, not the apps.
Oops.
Embarrassing, but not catastrophic. This one, on the other hand.
The hacked WordPress sites are using visitors' browser to hack other sites. This is actually pretty genius. So you can load applications in someone's browsers, and it can make outbound connections to other websites, including other WordPress sites. So you visit a malicious website, and you load a program in the background. Like, how you can go to the Internet Archive and run Windows 3.1, real, honest-to-goodness Windows 3.1 in the browser? They use that kind of a technique to be able to run malware in your browser ephemerally. What a great way to do bad things and not get caught.
Now, I've just recently learned of the subgenres of catfishing known as holiday rats and pig butchering. This is kind of like pig butchering. And it was an older guy, and he probably should not have believed that
He was cripplingly lonely.
This young Ukrainian beauty found him super fascinating. But she did, because he had security clearance.
Air Force employee accused of sharing classified information on foreign dating website. This is basically just a copy pasta of the the Discord leaker story.
Her quotes in here are so amazing. Let me see if I can find a couple of them. Oh man, it's taking too long. But basically,
how are your meetings?
Yeah, so stuff like,
you have a job in the operations center today. I remember. I'm sure there's a lot of interesting news there.
and some of them were like, "Do you have secrets, Daddy?" Like stuff like that. And he was pouring them out. He couldn't tell fast enough.
It's amazing people like that get security clearance, but
yeah,
cripplingly lonely.
All right, well, that's it for Tuesday. Come back, and we'll do another episode with you.
We got a lot of business this week.
Yeah.
No, the opposite actually.
Oh yeah. It's
little in the
middle. Got much back. Bye.